welcome back to the Empowered Intuitive Academy podcast, where we talk about all things spiritual and mundane. And this week we are chatting all about working with the ancestors. Ancestor Hotline, how can I help you? So, for a little bit of context, as I mentioned in the previous episode, I work with ancestors a lot in my spiritual practice. And there are many ways that we can work with ancestors in our magical and mundane lives. And there are ways that we do it in our mundane lives that we don't realize is ancestral veneration. Also, just FYI, you may hear my kids in the background. So for me, this looks like creating altars where I can pay homage to them, I can connect to them, I give them offerings, I communicate with them through divination. And a lot of the times I'm calling ancestor energies in to provide protection or wisdom or insight, or to help heal some of those intergenerational wounds that have been passed down through the bloodline. And when I'm sort of incorporating these practices into my own spiritual practice, I'm often drawing from examples of ancestral veneration, which occur across cultures, across timelines throughout humanity, throughout our time on this planet. And, in fact, a lot of the primal oracle is inspired by ancestral veneration, and it's inspired by our very first practices of this through mortuary practices, so burial practices, and recognizing that at this stage in our evolution, we were beginning to realize that there may be something beyond death and an ancestral realm. And so this is interesting because Petra, you researched a lot of different ways across cultures that we continue this tradition. Would you like to talk a little bit about those?
And it's like in my, I don't have a spiritual practice that that incorporates ancestors in the same way Tayla does, but I've always been interested in the concept of just the feeling that your loved ones are still with you, and that if something breaks in the house, for instance, or if something I make that comment because Tayla just had that happen to her.
So full context, my grandfather, when he passed away, things would start breaking in my house, often glass. And so every time that happens, it's sort of like a sign to say that he is around. And today, before we started recording this podcast, 2 glass jars broke. And that hasn't happened for a long while. So just context, but
just context.
Carry on, Petra.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, in my family, I sort of just like expected that if I lose something and I can't find it, you just keep looking for it. You don't find it. It's not anywhere it needs to be. You leave it alone, and then it will come, and you'll find it in the most ridiculous place, like a place where you couldn't have missed it. And I always just say thanks, Grandnan, like it's a little just thing that we have. And everyone just looks at me a bit silly, and they what are you talking about? Which it got me thinking about the concept of how people are just I don't, when you pass away, you pass away. It's the end. There's nothing more to it. But we have so many things in our modern culture that reflects on the fact that we may say that, but we're not necessarily acting in that way. And I'm just going to draw attention to the simple thing that we all have seen, and in a lot of Netflix series and that kind of thing lately, where you pour a drink. You pour a drink for those who've passed, where you just take a sip yourself and you pour it on the ground and that kind of thing. And people just accept that you're just honouring the persons that passed when you take that sip. I sort of like get that you can still believe that nothing happens after, but that's been around for a very, very long time. When I was researching it, there was some people, the Sumerians, I think it was, that actually believed that the people that were passed away would go into a purgatory type place where there literally was no food or drink, and they would just take in dirt and dust. And so when they buried their people, they put a clay pipe down into the ground to where they were. And this pouring of a drink has come from drinks and beverages being poured down as, what is it called? Libations? Is that what it's called?
Libations, yeah.
Yeah. It's poured down as a libation down the clay pipe, as an offering so that they could have a relief from the dust that they were having to consume. And it strikes me as funny that there's these little things that we do, that are so rooted in ceremony from a very, very long time ago.
That's so interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like
To the
that's not something I'd ever heard of prior to this. But it's like good to know where that comes from, because you
Yeah,
see it
and
all
it's
the
just
time on TV. Like you get a soldier and he pours a beer on the ground for a fallen comrade.
exactly,
Just to
and even from the word libation, it's become synonymous. And if you look it up now, it's oh, we'll have a little drink, or we'll have a little tipple,
yeah,
but it was never, that was not what the word meant. The word actually comes from this, of offering to deities, spirits, and ancestors. So I find that we've even hijacked the word to be synonymous with having a tipple,
yeah,
when it actually, that's not what it was. It's from a very ancient process of veneration.
yeah. And a lot of our practices that we have today are, and I just thought of it then. That clay pipe thing almost reminds me of like when they would put bells in graves so that, if you buried someone alive, they could tell you that they were still alive and they would ring the
That's
bell.
that's going off in a creepy direction
I
in
know,
terms
I
of the
know. We're going to
fact
have to talk
of
about
being
that.
buried alive. But
Yeah. We're going to have
but
to talk about
again,
that.
it's the bells and graveyards and that kind of stuff where
Yeah.
we don't realize the origins of some very, very simple things,
Yes.
like putting bells at a door. Not
Yeah.
wanting to go off on one of our tangents,
Tangents.
but it's these things that we don't realize. There's festivals
Yeah.
all around the world.
Yeah.
Like we see, Halloween. For
Yeah.
instance, I'll use Halloween, and everyone, oh, well, not everyone, a lot of people are like, oh, Halloween, it's just, American,
Yeah.
this, that, and the other, and it's just, commercialism of X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And that's fine. That's fine. And it has become that. My favorite celebration of the year is Halloween, and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
doing my house up ridiculously.
Yeah.
But if you move Halloween aside, and you'll know more about exactly where that thinning of the veils and the spirituality of that comes
Yeah.
from,
Yeah.
there are still festivals all the way around the world. The Night of the Dead or Day of the Dead.
Yeah.
What's it called? I can't remember, De Morte, that they have in
Della des Mortes.
yeah, and they
I
have,
think I'm sorry if I butchered that, but yeah.
yeah. And they have that both in Mexico and in Italy, which is
Yeah.
interesting, because I was looking at, now Italy's a very religious country, like
Mm,
it.
yes.
So it's, but where a lot of people get upset when you talk about certain things, and it's against religion, like it's
Yeah.
against this to have that concept.
Yeah.
You shouldn't celebrate this, but especially when you go lower in Italy,
Yeah.
some of their cultures, they keep some of that ancestral stuff on board,
Yeah.
and it goes back, I think, to like 1800, not 1800, 800 or whatever it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
So a long time ago, and they basically just celebrate those who passed. They
Yeah.
put a plate at table, and celebrate, and it encourages people to honor who's gone before.
Yeah.
But it's not just about honoring, like, and I feel like where it's been sanitized a little bit, they'll say, oh, we're just honoring those who passed and remembering them.
Yeah.
But the belief was that you put the plate there with the food, with the drinks, etc.,
Yeah.
because for that evening your ancestors joined you at table.
Yeah, and that tradition has carried over into the modern day dumb supper. It's one of the practices that as you know, I teach about working with your ancestors in the Walk of the Witch course. And dumb suppers are one of the most easy ways to invite your ancestors into a space and connect with them and communicate with them. on, nights like All Hallows Eve, which to the witching community is Samhain, which in the southern hemisphere that falls in April, but in the north it's October, hence the origins of the Halloween we know and love today, right? So, and Samhain is from the Celtic Gaelic festivals. It was one of the last harvest festivals. And so dumb supper is like one of the, and food in itself is such a rich way to connect with ancestors, because we have like family recipes and traditions, and I find in today's modern culture, we've lost a little bit of that because we all eat on the go and we don't cook together as much anymore. And our recipes are being replaced with fast, instant solutions. And so I really feel dumb suppers are such a beautiful, simple, wholesome way to connect with ancestors. And yeah, so, and we see a lot of that in these really ancient traditions with the libations and the offerings, and that need for sustenance on the other side in the afterlife. I mean, the Egyptians are a really good example of that, because they had a whole mortuary spiritual practice dedicated to making sure their ancestors were well taken care of in paradise. They had inscriptions on the tomb walls, and a whole book of the dead with chants to that you would say, the priest would say, to make sure that they were guided on their path to Osiris. Like and those things, we still do that today. We still do that when we hold funerals for people. We bury items and things with them that we think they might like, or we give them a casket with the color that they would have loved, or and we hold a ceremony in their honor that we feel that they would have been proud to attend. Everything is done with that person in mind, and that's really the base of ancestral veneration, is how we honor our dead initially.
But it's really interesting that there'll be people that are hard and fast. Their belief system is that when you pass, you pass.
Yeah.
And that's and when you honor, you honor. And that's a different, that's all part of the life and death cycle. Doesn't in any way speak to afterlife. But exactly what you touched on there is that, why go to that effort of picking out flowers that they would like? Okay, mark of respect.
Yeah.
Putting something in with it, and that's all across Western culture as well. It's across the world. Putting something in with them to take with them.
Yeah.
And that's where I think we have this scientific mind and this logical mind where we want to say, no, I can't accept afterlife, or I can, but I can only accept it in a religious form, as dictated by my religion, and my religion says X, Y, and Z. Yet we still cling on to these little comforts that don't really fall into either of those two baskets.
Yeah. And it makes me wonder if it is just a comfort thing, like just our way to help finalize that connection with that person, because we know we're not going to see them again in this lifetime anyway. And a lot of people keep items from the deceased to as mementos, as sentimental pieces. I have my sister's ashes in a bead around my neck, and I never take it off, because that's my connection to her now. And it's funny because her anniversary was yesterday, and today we're talking about beloved dead and ancestors and stuff. And the ways I honor and venerate her are completely different to the ways I honor and venerate my grandparents, because those relationships were different. And so I think there's a level of comfort there. Like, it's probably more for us than it is for them at times. Like, I think a lot of modern day belief is that when they get to the other side, wherever they go, they're okay. They don't need anything anymore. And we all like to believe that they are still here with us in essence and spirit, and they're watching over in one form or another. So, and in being spiritual, witchy or not, I think we still all at times reach out to them. there's always that one person on the other side that we would love to talk to, or that we would really need for comfort in moments where we feel despair, or
Well,
we need backup and protection. Like you
yep.
sort of you do it anyway without
You
the
do it anyway. And
yeah
that's what's interesting because, like I said, I don't have a practice where I work ancestors into my practice,
yeah
but it is a pretty strong bedrock in the When Magic Awakes
Mhm.
universe
yeah
that the characters within that um, truly do believe they've given strength by the people that have gone before. That some members of that family unit can communicate to a certain degree,
yeah
and we have those people making their presence known by the hiding of things and the X, Y, and Z.
yeah
But
yeah
that leads to the next thing, Tay, that we've spoken about in terms of the actual opening up lines of communication.
yeah
So, we can talk about the festivals that are in the background. And I'm just going to mention a few because you've got like the Festival of the Hungry Ghost
yeah
that is in China, like a huge festival where they create effigies of things that they would like to gift to their ancestors that get burnt at the end of the festival. But funny things like only in China, phones and things like that. But
yeah
it's all over the world. It's, there's this daily festival.
yeah
That's one side. So that's us. But where do we get the communication side?
yeah
That's what I want to talk about. So
yeah
go what you want.
so I mean, like we've said before, communicating with ancestors can be partly an intuitive process because you knew them best, right? Or if they're in your line, they're directly connected to you. And some ancestors may manifest in ways others don't. So, a lot of people that I know work with ancestors who are way up the line, right? We've never met them, but somehow their memories are imprinted in us. So, when we're reaching out through maybe a meditation or a journey or divination, a lot of the older ancestors will come through. And so, the ways that they might manifest for you are completely different to your recent beloved ancestors. Um, and in saying that too, there is a kind of freshness about recent beloved ancestors being able to connect. I feel like because they're so raw into the process of passing over into that ancestral realm, sometimes they might not be willing to reach out either. So it's all about sort of gauging that connection and creating that connection with them, no matter how old or young they are, and just sort of really using your intuition to discern how they are communicating with you. For me, a lot of my older ancestors will come through in dreams or in like meditation or journeying work. Whereas my recent ancestors or beloved dead, they'll come through in physical forms, like physical ways, not apparitions in my hallway because that's kind of weird. But like my nana, she was a smoker, right? So I keep a cigarette for her on the altar. But ever since she passed away, her presence is made known by a smell in the house, and it's either usually cigarette smoke accompanied with what her old unit smelled like, her apartment. And it's a smell that you just know what it is straight away, and everyone in my family can identify it. They go, "Oh, I smelt her house, like she's around."
Yep. Yep.
And yeah, more often than not, when that happens, I like to do a bit of divination and see what the goal is. And I've had some incredible insights come through and messages from her by following that process. Like I said before, my grandfather likes smashing shit. So I don't know why, but that has happened ever since he passed over. And yeah, so it's really an intuitive process, but it's also a really personal process. um
But I think we would all have experienced that.
yeah yeah
We might be writing it off as something else, and
yeah
let's be honest, we can smell phantom smells for many a reason, and
yeah
I'm going
yeah
to be the person who points out that it could be an oncoming migraine.
yeah
Being a migraine sufferer, I can smell all different sorts of things, but there sometimes there is that My dad's recently passed away. He plays in my head, just the way he speaks, the way he talks, the
Yeah.
different things he would say to me, and that's probably just him being in my head.
Yeah.
And that's fine, and that's lovely. But I've noticed, and only recently, that when he talks to me often in events where I'm not really thinking about him, I'm in the moment, I'm on the beach and I'm enjoying the water, and I'm like going, this is just so gorgeous.
Yeah.
And he would speak in my mind saying, well, I didn't think it was in my mind. I turned because I heard him so clearly say, you
Yeah.
wouldn't be dead for quids. That was what he always said when he was in a beautiful moment. You wouldn't be dead for quids. And I turned and like, it was so, but it was on my left-hand shoulder, which is really
Yeah.
interesting because I'm completely deaf in my left ear. So
Yeah. Right.
there's no way I could have heard anything from my left-hand side, and I never
Wow.
process sound from the left. Like I don't even know what it sounds like to hear from that. I've been deaf in that side for so long. And
Wow.
it wasn't until later that when my husband had seen me and he goes, what were you reacting to? Because you turned around. I said, I swear I heard Dad speak to me. And
Yeah.
he goes, but you do realize he spoke to you on your left-hand side. And I was like, I had not even noticed. And that's where it takes it from just that our minds creating
Yeah. Yeah.
almost a memory that bubbles up and for our own comfort,
Yeah.
to where it starts approaching a little bit of weirdness for me, where there's these tangible things that
Yeah.
are smells that are so specific, and you don't have any things that would cause you to be smelling that. Things breaking just before you're doing a recording about that
Yeah. Yeah.
exact thing that you're talking about. Like, I'm assuming you don't have things breaking in your house, every day.
No. No.
So it's interesting to me that and I think if we all stop to think of it, we would all be able to say, oh, look, if I believed that, sure, I would be able to reinforce that view by this and happening.
Mm.
But that doesn't prove anything,
Yeah.
right? I suppose we're not here talking about what's provable.
No. We're
We're
talking
just
about
talking about
personal experience, and a lot of my experiences, there's a tendency to try and rationalize,
yep,
especially modern day. Not everything is a spooky, and that's fine. Um, and we don't always want it to be that, because that's rather unsettling. But there's a tendency to rationalize. So when I'm sort of discerning about what is actually, someone trying to connect to me or whatever, or like the rational reason, I'm going off the pattern. So it's a pattern of appearance, right? Like the
yep,
glass breaks just before I'm about to do something, talk about ancestors or whatever. And it hasn't done that for months. I have not had that happen for months. The last
yep,
time it happened, it was a similar thing. I was talking about him,
yep,
next minute, shit starts breaking. So
yep,
there's a pattern there.
yep,
And if it's not within that pattern of appearance, I'm probably going to dismiss it as,
yep,
oh shit, I was clumsy and I really shouldn't have, put that there. Or, oh, there's someone smoking over there. Like, obviously, that's
yep,
what that
yep,
is, like, yeah. And yeah, it's so you have to really be discerning. And that's a whole thing in itself when you're honing in intuitive abilities and stuff, is knowing what is monkey mind and what
yep,
is easily explained, and when to be in that rational mindset when you're trying to discern communications and things, and then what is
yep,
actually intuition, like trusting that they are the messages and trusting
yep,
that you are cultivating that connection with whoever you're trying to connect with or whatever you're trying to connect with. So
yep.
yeah.
Yeah, because as you said, one instance can just be an instance of random happenstance. But
Yeah,
if it
exactly.
becomes pattern,
Mm.
or I hate to use a word coincidence in this thing, but
Yeah.
if it's a repetitive thing, like I've had it. Like I was saying, how things get missing.
Yeah.
My mum lost an engagement ring. That she lost it, and I'm
Yeah.
talking years. It was years lost. And then
Yeah.
eventually she found the engagement ring in the bottom of her bed, just
Wow.
Now, obviously, it was years,
Yeah, yeah,
and I'd like to think those sheets have been changed once or
yeah,
twice in that period of time.
exactly.
For it to be, and in the bedding, right?
Yeah,
In the bedding, and I've had the same thing happen. I've had, things where, funnily enough, this is a story that I was telling someone about this, that things get lost and then you find them, and you find them in places they couldn't be.
yeah,
I.e., you might have gotten out of bed, you hadn't made your bed this morning, you'd thrown the blankets back, but there was a book sitting on top of those blankets.
yeah,
Now, for the book to have been there, it had to have, it couldn't have occurred for it to have moved from here that you could have picked it up and put it there because the blankets would have, all this kind of stuff.
yeah, yeah,
And I was telling this to a friend of mine, and he was like going, "Oh, you're full of shit." And I go, "Oh, look, you know what? I probably am. I'll probably
yeah.
go with that." And he goes, "So you're just saying that at any point in time, someone can come in your house and they can move things around?" I said, "It's happened. Like it's happened." And
Yeah,
I am OCD, and
yeah,
when I tuck my chairs into my kitchen table, I tuck them in also there tightly against the table, and my table has like a cross at the bottom of it so that you can put the legs in so they're touching the edge of this cross. And we'd actually gone off and we were watching World Cup actually, so it was I can't remember, it was like we're talking 20 years ago,
yeah,
watching a World Cup final. And so he's, as a smart ass, gone back, and he'll know when he listens to this who I'm talking about. He goes back as smart ass into the kitchen area and says, "Oh, the chairs all look like they're in the same position that they were
ah,
before." And I go, "Oh, so they do." And being a smart ass, he leant against the chair and like he goes, "This is ridiculous." And as he did that, the chair slid in
yeah,
because it was actually about 3 inches away
yeah,
from being fully pushed in.
yeah,
All four chairs
yeah,
had all moved 3 inches away from the table, and everyone knows I tucked them in fully.
yeah.
And I said, "So what are you going to explain that as? Is that like the vibration from the heating system making all four chairs
Some,
vibrate away? Like,
yeah,
how do you
at the
explain that?"
exact distance. Yeah,
Yeah,
sometimes I feel like the rationalization process as well, it can be just as like
it's more kooky
silly as the
sometimes. It's
woo-woo.
like, dude, let it go.
Yeah,
You don't need
yeah,
to you don't have to think someone did that.
yeah,
You don't need to think that, but please don't tell me you think that was we had an earthquake
yeah,
and
yeah. And no one else felt it except the chairs.
yeah, and I just always go back to that, and I'm thinking, I'm not saying it means X. I'm not saying this means that occurred, and that means I had my grandnan or whoever
Yeah, yeah,
playing around with the chairs. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, and almost always when I have these missing things,
yeah,
um, are around special days. It's coming up to Christmas. It's
yeah,
coming up to
yeah,
birthdays. It's coming up to special days for those people.
yeah.
And I find that really interesting.
So,
Okay, so now I'm gonna throw you a question, Tay.
okay,
We've
you go
had this
first.
discussion. We've had this discussion, so you know what's coming your way.
Yeah, yeah,
When we were doing your course, Walk of the Witch,
yeah,
we were on this topic, and you were encouraging the people in the group to call on ancestors to give their power to your workings, etc., etc.
yeah, yeah.
And I was like the person that asked the question, like, what happens if I only have so many shots at it? Like, I only can call on that. Like, I'm thinking, I'm doing a bit of Vampire Diaries here, and I'm thinking to myself, what happens if I can only call on them X amount of times? I don't want
Yeah,
to waste that call out on, the person across the street's being annoying.
yeah.
What was your response?
My response was, it is by invitation, not obligation, on the behalf of the ancestors. So if you're petitioning your ancestors about stupid stuff, like the neighbor,
The neighbor being annoying.
being annoying, then
Well, he parks his car 5 centimeters outside of where I want him to park it. So I think I'm justified.
yeah, and you're all like, "Wait, granddad, go and like put his tire out or something. Like, just go and f up his day for me. That would be great." Someone's granddad might be on board with that. They're a bit of a trickster. Others are going to be like, "What? Sort it out yourself. Like, I've got things to do, like being in paradise and whatnot, whatever they do in that after realm, right?" So it's about invitation, not obligation. They can answer your call if they feel they want to. For
And that goes the other way too, doesn't it?
yeah,
That
yeah,
if you get energy offered to you from ancestors that you
yeah,
don't have the same vibe with for whatever reasons,
yeah.
because we're not going to say that we come from lines where everyone was walking the spiritual
No,
path of
and that's
becoming
sort
a
of
goodly person.
yeah, and that's sort of where my train of thought was going. So like with older ancestors, especially because they're obviously been in the ancestral realm, the after realm, the ethos for a lot longer than our recent deceased. So they're going to be a little bit more discerning about how and when they come through for you and help you. There have been times where I've tried to invoke older ancestors and they just weren't the right people for the job. Or they didn't have the right vibe, or they were not responding because they had some other shit on. I don't know what they were doing, but they were not coming to me. So, and then you get the other side of that, which is the not so benevolent ancestors, right? The ones that did either cause intergenerational harm or they were not nice people in life. And so if you're reaching out, you want to make sure that they're not the ones who you're calling on to help you. And that's through simply stating that in your invocations and things. But also, if they're reaching out to you, and like you said, if you get bad vibes, if you're not compatible, if they're the wrong person for the job, or if you just generally don't want that negative sort of energy coming through in your work, you have every right to not respond to that. And it's a two-way street in that regard.
Yeah.
It's just like the friendships and the relationships we have in life with our family. So we're going to be closer to some relatives than others, and there'll be some who we more than likely will go to frequently for things, and then others that where it's just like you're a bit more of an acquaintance because you're so distant and that connection hasn't been cultivated.
Well, that makes me think because you said they might have other shit to do.
Yeah.
Which was another one of my questions.
Yeah.
Because when we were talking about it, my thought process is, and like I've said this before, I am accused of thinking too much. And people saying, call on your ancestors and da da da. And I'm thinking, what happens there if they're on their own soul's journey? Like, obviously, there's more shit to get done than what we're doing. My belief there's more shit to get done.
Yeah.
And if they've just got me, like, I know they can, not answer the call.
Yeah.
But if they've got me woody woodpeckering them and they're literally trying to move on or reincarnate into their new life or whatever it is, and all they've got me is going, oh, Dad, do you mind? Oh, Dad, do you mind?
Yeah.
Is there a chance that I'm impacting? Is there a chance that I could be negatively impacting him or whoever, that I'm creating bonds that might be too strong when they're
exactly. So that's exactly what I would say is happening, is that you're creating this energetic tether for them which keeps them here. So they can choose not to answer the call, but if you're like continuously invoking and summoning and whatnot, you're intentionally creating an energetic cord to keep them here. And we see that a lot in like haunting scenarios, right? We've got someone who's recently passed over, or they might have passed over from a long time ago, but because someone who was alive kept calling on them and bringing them back into the space, they are unable to move on. And so we have to be really cautious about that in our reasonings for invoking and summoning them, or just trying to reach out and connect. And I think too, in those rituals, it's important to release as well, releasing that bond that has been made through ritual after it has been done, so that they can move about and go on and do what they need to do. Because it depends on the different school of thought that you have when it comes to the afterlife. In Buddhism and in ancient Egyptian beliefs, we have these circles of reincarnation. And then a lot of African indigenous beliefs, we have ancestral realms, which, our ancestors then become a part of our landscape. In Aboriginal culture, we don't actually say the names of people who have moved on, because it is to pull them back out of the dream.
Is that the reason
Yes,
why? Yeah, I did
yes.
not
So
know that that was the reason.
it's to not bring them back, because then they get stuck instead of moving
Oh,
on and becoming a part of the dream time again. So, and I mean, in this modern day and age, that's a really difficult thing to navigate too, because, if photos come into that play as well, we're not supposed to have photos and we're not supposed to say their names, but we have a lot of blended cultures into
yep.
the Aboriginal population of Australia today, myself included. I'm woolly woolly, and so but I was raised in a more European fashion, so I don't have problems with saying names and things. But for someone who is more connected to traditional culture and country and indigenous ways, that might be just a thing that doesn't happen. So yeah, but it's to not
That's
pull
interesting.
them back. Yeah. So
I did not know that.
yeah, and then that's the perfect example, of creating that tether, where they get stuck and then they can't move on to whether it be their next reincarnation, or whether they just need to sit in the ethos for a little minute and recalibrate before they decide what they're going to do next, and what's
Yeah,
cards for them in
yeah.
regards to their soul.
Because like I'm like thinking, out here doing like creating my little flow charts in my head,
Yeah,
and I'm thinking, okay, it's easy to look at it in a linear fashion
yeah,
where you're not an ancestor yet.
yeah,
But the reality is, if you believe in reincarnation, you are.
yeah.
You actually are yourself an ancestor to someone else or soon to be. Do you know what I
Well,
mean?
you are
So
you.
it's like
Yeah, yeah,
maybe sometimes when we have these hiccups where we're
yeah,
just like feeling really drained or we're feeling really distracted or we're feeling really whatever, who knows? Because
yeah. Well,
it's
I
a,
like to approach that theory as, I mean, let's start with, technically you are becoming an ancestor because
yeah,
you are living a life, right? And if
yeah,
you have children, you already are an ancestor. They are your
yeah,
descendants, right?
yeah,
So, and we're being conscious. A lot of people who do ancestral work and stuff are being conscious of how they live their lives, because they will be an ancestor in that realm. But there's another school of thought where, we're connected to this greater human consciousness, right? Like, I like to think about it as like the roots of a tree with these different neural networks and pathways that we connect to this big forest of humanity. And but if we're being recycled through that, when we die, we become part of, if you get buried or if you're cremated, you become part of the earth again. And so you go from being a human corporeal form to earth, which then fuels new life and supports new growth and animals and things. So we're constantly changing our form, which can be a more literal take on the term of reincarnation, right? We're
yeah,
not our original form that we consciously remember, but we are still very much part of that
yeah,
life. And so, as you put it before, like feeling the pull or having that
yeah,
drain, or even having weird dreams about people we don't know.
yeah.
Like, they might be little glimpses into what's happening for us
Yeah,
on a cellular level through the process of past lives, reincarnation, or being that ancestor energy.
yeah. And look, the interesting I think I found in this whole discussion is we've been talking about ancestors and that kind of stuff, and you mentioned before haunting,
Mm.
and my brain literally had never made the connection between an ancestor and perhaps a haunting.
Yeah.
I had not in any way made the connection between ghosts haunting and potentially ancestors, which is really funny how it just goes to show how without even knowing it, I think I'm a pretty out there thinker, that I
Mm.
had boxed things out.
Yeah.
I'd boxed them up and said, I know that's there.
Yeah.
That relates to when I'm doing X, Y, and Z, but I had not even thought of it from that perspective.
Yeah, so it happens more than we think, you know.
Mm,
It could either be an ancestor or a beloved dead that you've accidentally tied to the plane, or the earthly plane, or an ancestor or a beloved dead that does not want to let go. And so
Yeah.
they haunt, right? They stick
Yeah.
around. And the longer that they're here, the less value it is for them.
Yeah.
Their souls start to warp and they become not themselves.
Yeah.
I like to call it the deranged dead.
Yeah.
They start to sort of lose their essence and become this like menty energy.
That is so going to have to be on our list of things to talk about at a
Yeah,
future
yeah.
time.
I think definitely an episode on our paranormal experiences, because a lot of deranged dead have come
Yeah.
for me, particularly when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So yeah, they have that energy about them if they stay here too long. And when we're tethering them down, that's the risk that we run, is that they morph into something else, something
Yeah.
that they're not supposed to be, or is not going to benefit their soul incarnation
Yeah.
wheel. And that's wholly and solely depending on beliefs too. But
Yep.
isn't it funny, mentioning that you didn't realize that could be a link? How many people go into a haunting and just assume it's a stranger, or assume
Yes.
it's someone
And
who
that's what I'm
died on the
saying.
land or in the house, or
It did. That's what I'm saying. My brain had neatly boxed them away into be two completely different things, like not at all, which is really interesting. I find it. I always love it when I find my own boxes,
yeah,
where I find my own blinkers, and
yeah,
obviously I had just not made that connection. So
yeah.
really interesting. So let's do a summation.
Yes,
Let's do a summation. So we've got all of these traditions that have come back from thousands of years ago that we have always venerated our dead.
yeah,
We still have festivals to this day that are literally worldwide in one shape or form,
yeah,
either of just paying respects, or to take it one step further, to actually open our homes or accept that those our ancestors that passed on come and share our life with us for that one day, or
yeah.
etc. What else is the summation, Tay?
Well, our funerary practices and stuff are our base form of ancestral veneration. And even without the spiritualist, witchy aspect of ancestral veneration, we can still work with their energy and honor their, the presence and the lives that they had, and connect with them.
Yeah.
One thing we didn't really mention is tracing family trees and things. Like
Oh,
ancestor
yeah.
ancestor work can be tracing and finding out your lineage. A lot of people take DNA tests nowadays to fuck, because they want to know where they came from, they want to know their ancestry. And so I think that's and it's something I recommend heavily to do, is trace your family tree if possible, and your DNA lineage,
Yeah.
cultural lineage. And just to sort of cultivate that sense of belonging, and get to know and understand where your origins are. And you can do that without the intent of connecting through ritual and
Yeah.
things. But if you are going to connect to your ancestors through ancestor worship, and again, this is something that I teach in Walk of the Witch, which is over in our academy, BT Dub. We'll do links below for that. But I lost my train of thought. But so yeah, if you're going to work with ancestors, sorry, had a download, as the kids say these days, we can call on them for protection or insight or wisdom, or simply to get to know and understand ourselves a little better, because we come from these people, and like it or not, we carry their traits, and we might reach out to them to better understand why we do the things we do. As I get older, and now that I have children, I continuously hear my mother come out of my mouth.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so understanding her journey and her mother's journey and my great grandmother's journey is a better way of understanding me and where I come from. And
Yep.
that's a path and journey that I've had to really undergo with learning more about my Indigenous heritage, because that was not knowledge that was available to me as a child. Yet the connection was there. I knew I belonged on country. I just didn't know why.
Yep.
And so now that I have that knowledge, it's really enriched my life, and we do it for our children too. If we have
Hey, you know what we haven't spoken about?
Wow.
We've spoken about in witchy terms about calling on ancestors.
Yes.
What we haven't talked about is mediumship. There's a whole group of people out there that are mediums, and that's like a Western term for it, I suppose.
Yeah.
But you also have, in shamanic practices.
Yes.
That they like, I know in, what is it, voodoo and all of those kind of, with all the different ways of saying voodoo,
Yeah.
that they call on ancestors when they go into ritual.
Yeah.
So
a lot of the African traditions are very ancestral rich. And they have some deities and things here and there, but they consider those to be ancestor spirits. And original culture, we just consider the land and the deities to be ancestor spirits because we come from them, right?
Yep.
So, and those traditions, especially within African slavery and stuff, they were carried over to America, and then and Haiti, and that's where we get these creations of really rich Christian hybrid and ancestral hybrid spiritual magical practices. But yeah, you bring up a really good point. You can go to people who are trained to work with ancestral energy and mediums and things that they connect with the dead a lot better than the everyday witch can in most circumstances. And it's funny, a lot of witches don't delve into the realms of paranormal, yet we work with ancestors. So that's probably another chat for another time.
I know, because I had to Google before the difference between it, and I've looked at it before and it just almost my brain. And I think it's because we're so in Hollywood and what's coming out, that the term medium and the term psychic have become almost synonymous, which my understanding is they're really not. Like a medium uses their insight to be able to hear messages and connect with people that have passed. And psychic is someone that uses their extra senses to be able to pick up on energies. And it was really interesting when I was looking at it, but that was like more like your energy field is like a record of what's gone around you, and the psychics are picking up on that. So even in Western society where science is the norm, mediumship is still a huge thing. Yep, I'm sure there's a whole bunch of quackery out there, and there's a whole bunch of people just trying to get the coin.
Exactly.
But there are some people that are quite famous in it and have been tried. People who, for everyone who's trying to earn coin off it, in a not very authentic way. That's all I'll say. You've got as many people trying to debunk them.
Yeah, exactly.
So the ones that sort of can't be debunked, you've got to start saying, well, they're picking up on something.
Yeah.
They're picking up on something. I think that's interesting too, that there's so many things that we're happy, especially, when it's full, I'll just talk from the Western kind of thing, that it's just, I don't believe in this, I don't believe in this, and I don't believe this, but I'll have a drink from my dad on Father's Day. I'm just going to do that. And I'm just going to go, right next to me, I've got my granddad's, crocheted blanket next to me, because it makes me feel good. And, all of these little things.
Yeah.
We sort of like just accept, but it's nothing kooky about that. That's just,
That's just what we do. It's the accepted norm. And that's something that we, discussed about previously, what's accepted as normal in modern society and what's not when it comes to these practices. So we really,
and I think it's a bit of a shame. I think it's a bit of a shame that we felt the need to normalize everything.
Internationalize. But I think we've come full circle with that train of thought.
Yeah.
So it might be a good time to put a cap on this episode. And as always, remember, curiosity never killed any cats, but there is no growth in ignorant bliss. There you go.
There is not.
No. And thank you everyone for tolerating my kids. They decided to be loud. Like one of them just decided, hey, I'm gonna pull out the loudest toy that I've got, and I hope everyone enjoys it.
Okay. So next episode we are talking about the sleep paralysis.
Yes.
And
yes.
its connections with hag phenomenon, if
Yeah.
no one has heard about that, which is a lot of what I talk about in my book series. So that is going to be a fun one.
I'm very interested to learn more about the old hag and paralysis. Alrighty.
All right.
Next time.
Bye.
Bye.